Hi, I'm John. Today I'm going to be talking about the Donovan Mitchell trade rumors this offseason. So far, the Jazz have already traded Rudy Gobert to the Minnesota Timberwolves. Danny Ainge, the GM of the Jazz, totally rinsed those guys. And the Knicks should be careful because it looks like they're the best suitor for Donovan Mitchell. So what's the best price to pay for this guy, and how does he fit into the Knicks' future? So Donovan Mitchell is a 25-year-old all-star scoring shooting guard. Say that 3 times fast. Last season, he averaged 26 points, 36% from 3, 45% from the field, 85% from the line on 4.7 free throws per game. He's got 4 more years left on his contract. The last year is a player option, but 2 years ago he led the Jazz to the number 1 seed in the West. Despite that success, there were some doubters. Let's roll the clip from LeBron James here.
Presented by those 2 players, Donovan Mitchell goes to Team Durant, and Rudy Gobert goes to Team LeBron.
Listen, before we get, I just want to say something because there's no slander. There's no slander to the Utah Jazz, but you guys got to understand. You guys got to understand. Just like in video games growing up, we never played with Utah. Even as great as Karl Malone and John Stockton was, we would have never picked those guys in video games. Never.
So that might have been some foreshadowing there by LeBron. The Jazz went on to have a pretty disappointing playoffs. They lost to the Clippers without their superstar in Kawhi Leonard and had 39 points dropped on them by Terrence Mann, who's a second-round pick in his 2nd season. That's pretty embarrassing. And then they went on to last year have a pretty blessed season all around. It was pretty obvious that Gobert and Mitchell just didn't jive with each other. They don't like each other, and they're regressing as a team too. And there was no larger sign of the rebuild to come than the Danny Ainge hire. Now, Danny Ainge is known to make some big trades, and this offseason was no different. He broke the internet with the Rudy Gobert trade to the Timberwolves for a huge haul of draft picks and players, traded Royce O'Neal for a pick, traded Pat Beverly to the Lakers for Taylor Horton-Tucker and Stanley Johnson, and there's still more players to get traded to. We got Mitchell, Conley, Bogdanovich, Clarkson off the bench too. So there's a lot more work to be done from Ainge still, but the big piece here is Donovan Mitchell. Now, while the Jazz look like they'll be tanking for a while, the Knicks have actually been trying to win games for the past 2 seasons. They've been handing out big contracts. Randall got paid, Brunson got paid. Now, I think they've been overpaying these guys, but I think the strategy for New York is look competent, win games, and maybe you can attract a superstar to that mega media market. It's just been such an ugly place of basketball for so long that they haven't been able to attract stars, but it is a huge media market, and playing in the Garden is always a draw for players. So what do we know about this trade so far? Well, we know Donovan's being shopped. We know the Jazz want picks over players because they don't have a timeline set yet. They don't know who they're building around. And that puts the Knicks in a great spot because they've got a lot of draft capital. They got 4 of their own first-round picks, and they've got some lightly protected first-round picks, the Mavericks in 2023, the Bucks in 2025. Now, those will be later first round, but at least you'll get those for sure. There's also some more heavily protected picks from the Wizards and Pistons, first-round picks in 2023, but with those protections, I don't see them actually being used until maybe 2025, 2026, so definitely less valuable. There was a report from Shams Charania of a trade offer. The Jazz actually declined an offer of Evan Fournier, Obi Toppin, and 5 of those first-round picks. Now, only 2 of them were the coveted, unprotected Knicks picks. I think the other 3 belong to the other teams. But how do we know, is this a good trade? Should the Knicks take this? How does Donovan really fit into their plan? So the Knicks' plan is to become a winning, competent franchise to try to attract a superstar. Now, it's hard to win an NBA championship. You need a number 1 option, number 2, and a number 3. It's not that simple, but it's a good framework to think about it. And so far, the Knicks have, they have some potential number 3 guys in Brunson and Randall. I think RJ Barrett could be a number 3 guy, and he has more potential too. He could even be a number 2, but that's a little far-fetched. Like, you got to think about Jaylen Brown, PG-13, Kyrie Irving when he actually wants to play basketball. Now, Donovan Mitchell, on the other hand, he's a certified number 2. I don't see him being a number 1 unless he really draws on that defense that he showed potential for in college. But this guy can get a bucket in the playoffs, man. Last year, he had an ankle injury, but the previous 2 years, he averaged 34 points a game on 47% from 3, 49% from the field. And this would really set the Knicks up with a number 2 option, a number 3 option, leaving them only with the task of finding that number 1 option superstar. Now, that is the hardest part, but let's think about how much assets we need to leave over for that superstar and how much we can spend here on Donovan Mitchell. Now, no matter how the Knicks convince a superstar to come to New York and take them to the championship, they're going to have to trade for that guy. There's just too much money already being paid out once we get Mitchell on this team as well. So you need assets for that trade. And you also need some assets left over because you're going to have to build around that core as well. Okay, so let's work backwards on a hypothetical for the Knicks here. We'll say 2 years from now, they go from right now, just trying to win games, to actually trying to win championships. By then, they'll unlock another first-round pick out to 2031. This will leave them with 5 unprotected picks they can trade, 2 lightly protected first-round picks from other teams, 2 heavily protected first-round picks from other teams too. So we'll start off with some sort of allotment for role players once we put the whole squad together. I'll say the last 2 Knicks picks in 29 and 31 should be that, because, you know, you're going to end up in a situation where you've got to get rid of Randall and his contract, kind of like the Lakers are right now. And you see Westbrook's deal, plus 2 first-round picks, is giving them some potential great role players in Turner and Hield. So now we have to think about trading for a number 1 player. Now, this is super unpredictable. You look at the KD and D'Angelo Russell trade, the Nets only had to throw in 1 first-round pick. But then on the other hand, the Anthony Davis trade with the Pelicans, the Lakers had to give up a young star in Ingram, a great prospect in Lonzo Ball, and someone who turned out to be somebody, Josh Hart, along with 3 picks, pick swaps. So any trade from the Knicks, you're going to have to include RJ Barrett as that young prospect, along with some other young studs, maybe Quentin Grimes, Emmanuel Quickley. And then it really comes down to situation on how many picks you're going to give up. Is it going to be 1, 2, 3, maybe even more? Well, what happens after a Donovan Mitchell trade? Well, if the reported trade went through instead of being declined, remember that was 5 total first-round picks, 2 of them belonging to the Knicks, 3 of them belonging to other teams. If that goes through in 2 years, the Knicks have 3 of their own picks to trade, and they have 1 other teams to trade, but they've got to get themselves that superstar number 1, and they've got to build around them too with some role players. Now that's kind of risky, that's not much assets, and I really don't see how the Knicks can offer any more than they reportedly already did for Donovan Mitchell and still hope to be a championship team anytime in the near future. So wrapping up, I think if Mitchell to the Knicks does happen, the Knicks have already offered a lot in my opinion, and I don't see any other packages for other teams that can really compete. That said, Danny Ainge is out to rob people, he robs GMs and surprises them, so I could definitely be wrong and be surprised too. Now, it is reported the Jazz want this done before training camp in late September, so I hope we find out soon, and I'll be there to break it down when we do. Peace.